Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private.
Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private. My name is Alexis, and I am a former alcoholic and addict now in recovery. The Recovery Cast is a podcast created by people in recovery from alcoholism and addiction for people in recovery from alcoholism and addiction. This podcast is meant as a support tool for those in recovery. Everyone who participates in the podcast is in an active recovery program. We are not affiliated with any one recovery methodology, and we'll focus on a variety of different types of recovery, including 12-step recovery, otherwise known as Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, Recovery Dharma, Cognitive Behavioral Therapy, and more. And a quick disclaimer, this podcast is intended to be informative. A podcast alone cannot support your sobriety and recovery, so we suggest it only as one component of a daily recovery routine. For more information on what recovery is, go to www.rehab.melbourne. Hi, Ollie.
Hey. Awesome.
How's it going?
Oh, look, I'm living the dream. Really, I am. I'm in recovery and dealing with life on life's terms and enjoying things that I wouldn't have normally gotten to do if I was still using. So here we are, you know. How about you?
I don't know.
It's that morning check-in again, all over again.
Yeah. I am okay.
Yep.
I am reluctant to discuss today's topic, but also a willing participant. So
cool. Well,
do you want to do the reading?
We'll talk about why, you know, and why do you feel that way? We'll talk about that. So Today's reading is December the 6th, and it is entitled Romance and Recovery. Relationships can be a terribly painful area. Basic text, page 82. Love is like an elixir for some of us. The excitement of a new lover, the intrigue of exploring intimacy, the sense of release we get from allowing ourselves to become vulnerable. These are all powerful emotions, but we can't forget that we have only a daily reprieve from our addiction. Holding on to this daily reprieve must be the top priority in any recovering addict's life. We can become too involved in our relationship. We can neglect old friends and our sponsor in the process. Then when things get difficult, we often feel that we can no longer reach out to those who helped us prior to our romantic involvement. This belief can lay the groundwork for a relapse. By consistently working our program and attending meetings, we ensure that we have a network of recovery even when we're deep in a romance. Our desire to be romantically involved is natural, but we mustn't forget that without our program, even the healthiest relationship will not guard us against the strength of our addiction. Just for today, in my desire for romance, I will not ignore my recovery. The last 6 words are what really comes up for me is that I will not ignore my recovery. And we've talked about recovery coming first on so many episodes, and I think our listeners should be aware that dealing with alcoholism and addiction is an extremely huge and profound undertaking in our lives, and if we don't put everything we've got into this, then we are probably destined to either fail and relapse or just live a very unhappy life in recovery. So that is it. I will not ignore my recovery. And it says also, holding on to this daily reprieve must be the top priority in any recovering addict's life. How important. So what do you think about the reading, Alexis?
I think it's incredibly relevant for where I'm at right now, actually.
Yeah.
And I don't want to admit that, but it's true. I'm coming up to 18 months clean, and I did the whole, let's try not to do a relationship in the first year. And like that wasn't always that clean. Like I did kind of hang out with a few people and like flirted with a few people, you know, but I did my best not to get emotionally attached or romantically involved. And anyway, so I turned a year clean, and then I met somebody, and we've been dating for the last few months. And just recently, only in the last few weeks, I just felt like everything was going really well. And I kind of stopped doing some things. I kind of stopped showing up for myself in a few areas where I really do need to work diligently, specifically around, if anyone is familiar with AA and NA, like the steps, specifically around the step 10 area where I'm taking personal inventory every day, you know, and just checking in on my behaviours and my thoughts and my feelings, and
looking at what you've done.
Those affected me, you know, and if they affected anyone else. And unfortunately, like I having my first argument with my new partner, and it really sucks. And it is because I let myself think that, things are okay. I can get a bit slack with my program. And so this is a really relevant reading, and it's interesting that it's coming up right now as well. And it's just something that I can take on board, and I can keep in mind that, like it's a lesson. Get back to doing your daily step 10, give it a couple of days, make a proper amends. And, it doesn't have to be all bad, even though myself, like my inner self, wants to take it and run with it and think that it is all bad. I've destroyed everything. I can't fix anything. There's no coming back from it, which is just ridiculous, and that's the side of me that wants me to feel that, like that's true, because that's the side of me, like candidly, that gets me to use, like
well,
that, those thoughts that
it's
laying the groundwork where I'm trying to tell myself that I'm unlovable and that, I'll never be able to do this or do that. And I've used on those sort of feelings in the past, and I have to work hard to make sure that that doesn't happen this time. But I'm doing it, right in the thick of it. So,
yeah, it's my experience that, that I think I can probably one-up you there and say that I got into a relationship when I was about 30 days clean, or some time around that point. And, I met someone who was in the same facility that I was in, and got into a relationship with them. And contrary to sort of what this reading says, I actually I don't understand how or why, but I had this feeling that I really needed to not ignore my recovery. And I think I realized that I needed to stay plugged into the program. And for some reason, I was able to have that relationship, and actually it was probably one of the healthiest relationships. In fact, the healthiest relationship I'd ever had at that time. And that was amazing. And I think the reason it was healthier than any of the others had ever been was because when I was in active addiction, that the drugs, the alcohol always came first. And the moment it became a problem for the other person, I would push them away, because I always put the drugs first. And I think what I did was I switched it, so I always put the recovery first. And that's what I've always done in recovery, is my recovery has always come first, which is why I'm nearly 4 years and 2 months completely clean and sober. And when things did happen in that relationship, she cheated on me. I was able to say, well, I've done the right thing by this person, and I've done the right thing by myself, and it hasn't worked out. And I also have the boundaries to say, well, that's not appropriate. I don't want this to continue, and I'm gonna, I sort of ended the relationship there. And it's amazing that I was able to do that, because I actually it was the healthiest sort of interaction I'd ever had, and that I'm still, I still follow this person on Instagram, and I see that they're doing well, and I wish them nothing but the best, and there's no hard feelings at all. And you know what? It was literally just because I put my recovery first, and to say, well, actually, I'm powerless over what other people do, what this person did, and I can either get resentful and harm myself and harm them and behave in those old controlling ways, or I can stay plugged into my recovery, call my sponsor about it, and my sponsor said, well, you got into a relationship in your first year. What do you expect is going to happen? You're not equipped to deal with this experience, so you need to focus on your recovery and you need to let that relationship go. And I took that on board and I did what I was told because I knew that I didn't know any better. So that's why I'm still here today. And I think I became aware that I was actually a relationship seeker, and we're going to talk about this after the break, that I used relationships to fill a hole that was left by, the drugs and alcohol. When that was removed from my life, I had to do something else, and the addiction popped up in other ways, and relationships were one of them. So we'll take a quick break and we'll talk about that some more.
You're listening to the Recovery Cast by Hills and Rangers Private. Now playing daily on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. For more shows, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.
You're on the Recovery Cast with Oliver and Alexis, and I was just talking about how I got into recovery and I became a bit of a serial dater. And when I did some more step work and just stayed in recovery long enough to take a good hard look at myself and say, what am I doing? What are my motives? I realized that, and I was able to take steps to kind of try to seek that fulfillment through working my recovery program stronger, so that I didn't need to fill an absence inside myself with another person. And that really, I was thinking about codependency, Alexis, in recovery, and I see, I don't know if I see it a lot, but I hear about it a lot, that we, us people in recovery have relied on others. Perhaps it's one person in a really codependent or toxic relationship for a long time, and we have to learn to stand up on our own 2 feet and take responsibility for our own actions. And that's why it's suggested that in the first year of recovery, it's healthiest to work on yourself and not share your life with anyone else in a really involved and romantic way. Don't you think?
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
I think, like, for a lot of us, especially like just the ones of us who come into the room single, like, we've really got to repair the relationship that we have with ourselves before we can think about having relationships with other people. And I'm guilty of it as well, like looking for things outside of myself, validation, attention, affection, in order to quell the way that I was feeling inside, especially in early recovery.
Yep.
And it's okay, to do these sort of things, but like the growth is in the awareness, in recognizing it for what it is and catching yourself and being able to be, stop yourself from doing anything that could cause yourself and your recovery harm, and put you in a position where you might not be that well equipped to cope with it.
I relied on external things to feel good, and they were things that you could get at the bottle shop or in drugs or whatever. And when I came into recovery, I realized that they were off limits, so I started looking for other things. And dating and relationships were one of them. So in a way, it's just another behavior that is sort of feeding that same addictive pathways in our brain. So that's why it's the suggested thing, that you have to break that that habit. You have to break that process. And look, I'm fully aware that there may be people coming into recovery who are married. You know, there may be people who come into recovery who have had the same partner for a number of years, and that partner, I mean, I know this. I know that. I know that some people get clean together, or they, you know, enter recovery together in a relationship, and there's more than one reality and there's more than one experience. And I think what Hills and Rangers Private does for people like that is it provides, there's couples counselling, and the experts at Hills and Rangers Private actually counsel and educate the partner who, you know, has watched their loved one go through that terrible experience of living with addiction. And they learn what it's like. I mean, the partner has to learn, and the person who's in treatment has to learn how to live in recovery in this relationship. And it's a really, really complex thing. So I almost feel like perhaps for someone who comes into recovery who's single, I mean, it's complex because we have to negotiate this new environment of staying single or entering into it, the first relationship in recovery, you know, in our lives. And then there's also the people who perhaps have a husband or a wife or whatever at home. How do you go on with that? And I think what is important, and regardless of what your situation is that your recovery needs to come first. And we've talked about that. This episode's entitled Relationships, but it's really, I mean, that's my job here is to remind everybody that, hey guys, your recovery has to come first, and without your recovery, you won't have the relationships. You know, there's, if I can talk about myself, is that my addiction destroyed all of my relationships before I got into recovery, and some afterwards. I mean, I had a girlfriend that's all you care about is that car, you know, because that's my biggest hobby, and that is sometimes becomes a little bit unmanageable for me. And it was, you know, sometimes I just have to take a look at my behaviour, and it's staying in recovery that allows me to do that. So yeah, I mean, and I think for you, Alexis, you know, you're going through that journey yourself of experiencing a relationship and learning what it's all about. And, you know, I know that
learning how to have a healthy one for the first time.
Well, I know that your recovery seems to, from my end, to be strong enough to be able to tolerate and deal with the things that brings up. Well, you know, it's just an observation. You know, no need to thank me. It's not a compliment. You know.
Okay, yeah, true. Actually, I retract my thank you.
Yeah. You know, and you know, yeah, that's what we have to learn to deal with. And I think in the first year, when we're changing our brain and we're changing our entire, you know, our lives and ourselves, it's really difficult to manage both. It just is. And the proof is in the pudding for me, is that now I've been in a relationship now with my partner. We're living together. I'm not living with my mum, and we've been together for, you know, almost 2 years. I think it'll be in March next year, it'll be 2 years. So, you know, 18 months plus. And one, you know, first of all, that's the longest relationship I've ever been in. And second of all, you know, I'm living out of home. We look after a dog together, you know, we own a dog together. We're doing all this stuff, and the only reason that I'm actually able to do that is because I've put my recovery first. And I still make mistakes. We still have arguments. We still do things, and I still am called out by her, and she tells me off for my behaviour, and I have to say, well, what's my part in it? I need to look at that. And I've learned that stuff through my recovery. I've learned that stuff because I've stopped doing those toxic, addictive things. I'm now accountable and mature enough, and I've learned enough to be able to say, well, what's my part in it and how can I change it, rather than overreacting and going and using, because that would have been the response in the old days. And, you know, even when I got entered recovery, when I was living at home with my mum, even though it was that kind of a relationship, a family relationship, even something like that is actually difficult. when there's, it's not a romantic or intimate relationship, it's a family relationship, there's still so many things. So I think it's sort of like we have to make it and keep it simple. Just keep it simple, and throwing a partner into the mix is maybe not keeping it simple. Yeah. But the beautiful thing is, and I can see that you're going through it, is we learn to have those relationships, and we learn to have healthy relationships. And that's on offer because of recovery, and that's what you learn to do when you're in recovery, don't you think?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And it's, you know what, it's something that I didn't actually anticipate to be a part of recovery. I thought that I'd get clean and stop drinking and like everything would be fine.
Yeah.
So it's been a big learning curve, but I'm really immensely grateful that I am on this journey, because if I wasn't, I don't know where I'd be, so all the credit to it in every way.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal journey where we learn to share our lives with our true selves, and we learn to share our lives in that way with another person. And for me, for the first time, when I got into recovery, all the people around me got to see the best version of me, and that made healthy relationships possible. I think that's what it comes down to. It's so beautiful to be in recovery. And as you said, I am also incredibly grateful, because my relationships in the past, it was just so superficial, and they didn't last. And I knew that they were just I was just going through the motions, and it wasn't a true intimate relationship. When you actually allow yourself to be accepted by the other person for who you are, and when you accept them, that all that stuff wasn't possible when I was using. So I think it's my challenge. I don't know if I can even do a challenge on this topic for today, but in a relationship, I think just be aware, for our listeners, just be aware that as it says, relationships can be a terribly painful area. So we have to keep that awareness. I think my challenge is to keep that awareness around how we have to keep our recoveries in mind when we are negotiating relationships. And by the same token, we're in recovery. We are earning the right to have those healthy relationships, often for the first time in our lives. So be careful, but enjoy, I think that's all I can say. What do you think?
I think that's a very good, wise sentiment.
I've lost you there. I've gone to
approach with caution. With caution and love as well. Love yourself. Just try to love yourself.
Yeah. That's such a good challenge.
That's the least you can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
The least and the most, really.
Yeah. That's so interesting, is that I wasn't really thinking about relationships as in the relationship with ourselves, which you pointed out. That's so important. And if you're not in a relationship,
and it reflects everything. It reflects upon how we interact with the
with the world. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I've been relying on those externals and relying on other people to feel good, and often the hardest thing is actually to love ourselves and have a healthy relationship with ourselves, and not hate ourselves for the things we did in our using or alcoholism, in our addiction, and we have to learn that. So we're going to talk. These readings, they come up. There's going to be more like this. So in the meantime, I think if you want to sort of find out more about relationships and how to go through this, and counselling and what's available, jump on www.rehab.melbourne. There's lots of things and ways to do it. But in the meantime, take it easy, and thank you for listening to another episode of the Recovery Cast. I'm really enjoying having Alexis on here as a co-host.
Thank you.
No worries. Yeah, we'll keep talking about this stuff, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Recovery Cast. For more, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.